Do you know that feeling you get when you boot up an old game and after a very short intro, the game gets the hell out of its own way and just lets you play? No fire hose of tutorials, no 30 minutes of cutscenes full of characters you don't care about yet. Cut loose, kid. You have a controller, press buttons, fuck around and find out. Modern games lack the soul and quality of classic games, is a growing sentiment among many gamers, and in most moods, it's one I share. But are classic games actually better? Let's pop the hood and get to the bottom of this. Classic games excelled at clarity. No, I'm not talking about in-game objectives or systems, which were quite often opaque, more on that later. I mean clarity in what the game was. What kind of experience you could expect from the game. If you were to pick up any randomly selected game made in the 8 or 16-bit era and boot it up blind, my bet is that you wouldn't need more than 5 minutes to fundamentally understand the experience the game was going to deliver. Juxtapose this with modern games that have stacking systems, complex character building, and tutorials popping up well into the mid-game, you might have to spend a dozen or more hours in a modern game before you finally conclude, meh? This game's just not for me. Classic games, in my experience, generally require less cognitive overhead. Sometimes you really do just want to boot up your game, turn off your brain, and enjoy the ride. To be clear, I think players like mechanical depth. We enjoy being challenged up to a point, and we like the endeavor of mastering a game's systems and testing ourselves, but we don't like being confused. I want my downfall to be from a misplay or clear failure of execution or planning, not because I have no idea what the hell just happened. Hot take, while I love the Xenoblade series, I enjoy it for the story and vibes, and I'm not the biggest fan of the combat. I'm sure if I took more time than I was ever willing to take to grapple with the systems, I'd better understand them. But I resent the fact that I'm showered with stacking systems all game long, with accessories and options that I, quite frankly, cannot easily make sense of. Am I the dummy? Probably, but I can't be the only one who will take X Strike do big damage over Xenoblade's whatever the hell this is any day of the week. Sometimes number go up really is the better progression system than if X then Y plus or minus Z squared stipulating the in-game weather and time of day. Sidebar, if you're expecting a unilateral diatribe dumpstering modern games, you've come to the wrong place. This video isn't going to be a retro gaming circle jerk. Modern games absolutely do some things better, and we'll get to that later. To give the devil his due, there's absolutely no way I'd want systems as complex as Xenoblade's without the shower of tutorials that accompany it. But that begs the question, is the juice worth the squeeze? There's a famous quote attributed to Albert Einstein, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." And the way I feel about game design is, if I can't understand it simply, it isn't designed elegantly enough. If I can't make it through the first hour of the game without constantly being interrupted because the game thinks it has to explain to me how to play it, something is misfiring here. I want intuitive design, and I also prefer not constantly having my immersion shattered just so that Deus Ex Machina can pause the game to teach me how to operate the Large Hadron Collider to atomize enemies following a 300-hit combo. Dude, I've been playing the game for 20 minutes. Just give me the basics, a modicum of trust, and let the game breathe. Trust. This might be the biggest virtue of classic games that seem to be all but lost in most modern games. Perhaps here I should briefly stipulate that when I'm comparing classic to modern games, I'm talking in shorthand, directional tendencies. Not all classic games are clear and simple, and not all modern games are annoyingly tutorialized. You can find exceptions that prove the rule, but you and I both know you're not going to find Ubisoft levels of handholding in any Sega Genesis game. Last year, in my video celebrating my 10 favorite games of 2025, 3 of my top 4 were Expedition 33, Blueprints, and Quartet. And they all excelled in the way I'm talking about here. Expedition 33 didn't have any zone maps, to say nothing of icons or quest markers showing the way. You had to navigate by, imagine this, looking around at the environment to chart your course through a zone. But the thing is, if you paid just a little attention, E33 did have its own tells. The main path would usually have lamps marking the course, while side paths would lack such lamps. The game never explains this, it's just something you can notice by paying attention to the environment, by immersing yourself in the scenario. Quartet brilliantly also dodged this pitfall by instead designing a game that was simply extremely intuitive and in the spirit of classic games. And Blueprints, well, grab a notebook and a pencil and be prepared to not be able to sleep at night while you break your brain laying awake in bed trying to figure out what in the unholy Gehenna this means. But in all three cases, these games built scenarios that are yours to explore. There's almost nothing worse than feeling condescended to by a game. I decided to skip The Adventures of Elliot because honestly, Zelda-likes really aren't my first choice, but I did catch the buzz that the princess is literally a voice inside your head who won't shut up about every single thing happening around you.
We found a treasure chest.
What could
Let's
this
see what's
be?
inside. Would that structure be some kind of ruin? We'd better investigate. Have you considered using your shield instead?
Yeah, I thought this should go without saying, but if you're going to put puzzles in a game, give us at least a minute or two to rub our last two sputtering brain cells together to see if we can figure out if we need to pull the only statue in the room onto that conspicuously flashing bright red panel on the floor. Back off and trust me, game. System limitations were real 30 years ago. There was a very finite amount of memory, which is to say game, that a dev was going to be able to fit onto a cartridge. This meant a number of things, perhaps something like 3 save slots, or worse, one of those huge insane passwords some classic games used to require, a feature of retro gaming I imagine exactly none of us miss. But this also meant that the main scenario of the game didn't have a lot of wiggle room to, let me not mince words, waste time. I've made it no secret on my channel that I prefer shorter RPGs to overlong ones, and I've additionally made it no secret that I think modern games more often than not are too bloated and in turn worse off for all of the side content they cram into the experience. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy side content in moderation, especially when the content is good, the rewards are good, and they still offer good supplementary storytelling and character moments, like Chrono Trigger. But my patience for side content is thinner when it's heaped by the bucket in an already overlong game that's precariously risking overstaying its welcome. I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But the truth about classic games is that this problem was a luxury they couldn't afford. If you wanted to create an RPG in 1994, you really did only have enough cartridge to make the game you wanted to make, with probably more trimmings and concessions than anything else. Recent news about game preservation and ownership has made this top of mind for many of us, but it still warrants saying that I think most of us miss the fact that a classic game was a self-contained object. You bought a complete game. No early access, no DLC, no post-launch patches, and no wondering if one day the object nestled in your entertainment center would no longer be playable or even yours. Make no mistake, this doesn't mean classic games launched bug-free, or perfectly designed, or balanced, or anything like that. But it did mean those bugs, flaws, or limitations, too, would inextricably become part of the game. Exploits that speedrunners might leverage 30 years later, quirks and roughness that might have even added to the game's charm and texture. I understand why development teams endeavor to perfectly QC their games. But as it happens, finding a bug that lets you duplicate rare candies will get the kids at the playground talking more than sterile game balance and spit-shine flawlessness ever will. Roughness aside, games were necessarily more risk-tolerant 30 years ago than they are now. This was for several reasons. First, the medium was in its infancy. On that new frontier, virtually everything was a novel bid to become the next classic. The RPG tropes we can spot a mile away now were being innovated then. Secondly, games were cheaper and significantly quicker to make. There was less riding on the success or failure of any given entry. Smash cut to 2026, where decades of market research and consumer data are at the fingertips of every AAA studio. Which is exactly why everything they make turns to gold, sells off the shelf, and doesn't more often than you might think get outright bodied by indie and AA companies. Right? Look, I'm not a game designer, I'm not a market researcher, so this really is just glib conjecture on my part. But designing games that cost hundreds of millions of dollars and the better part of a decade to make understandably scares any and all stakeholders stiff. I get it, who would want to take risks with that kind of time and money on the line? But video game players can smell this level of risk aversion and corporate sanitization from a mile away. These releases from AAA giants that amalgamize into this amorphous blob, the product equivalent of shh, HR is in the room. These technically impressive, soulless juggernauts without any sauce. And so the innovation falls to indies to pick up all of that creative slack. Finally, because they tended to be shorter, better paced, and more pick up and play friendly, classic games tend to have better replay value. I can enjoy Chrono Trigger in any mood, and thus revisit it often. I thoroughly enjoyed Persona 5, but honestly, one 95-hour romp was enough for me. Sorry, Royal. The fuss here, as I hope I've articulated, is not just nostalgia. Classic games, on their merits, had a lot going for them. But it's only fair now that we flip the script and take a look at what modern games actually do right. Despite everything I just said, I want to make one thing very clear. I don't think modern games are categorically bad. Some are unimpeachable masterpieces, and I don't think the truth of the matter is as simple as old good, new bad. That's reductive, unnuanced, and frankly not true. As mentioned previously in this video, it should firstly be appreciated that there are, mostly in the indie space granted, new games coming out that actually do understand these lessons of the past. Balancing game depth with simplicity, clarity with complexity, and staying out of the player's goddamn way. And by the way, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows back in the 90s. I was 8 years old when my uncle and I were playing a Sega Genesis game called Beyond Oasis. We got stuck in what I now know was the final dungeon. My uncle called Nintendo Hotline. Yes, children, in the Stone Age before the internet, there were call center people that you could call to try to help you solve your in-game problems.
Okay, so you're looking for the white sword in Zelda?
Well, I know where it is, but I can't get my hands on it.
Which quest are you in?
The first quest.
Okay, well, you know where it is.
Yeah, right.
All right. What you need to have are 12 heart containers.
Right.
And that's the only thing.
Okay, I've got 12.
Well, then you should be able to get it. You just walk up and you present yourself to the gentleman, and he'll give you the sword.
Anyway, the operator had absolutely no idea how to help us. And now, 30 years later, I've still never beaten that game. Lack of handholding is good, right up until the point that your perseverance and best honest effort fails and you drop the game never to pick it up again. There's a difference between wanting a game to trust me to figure out how to solve problems for myself and being obtusely opaque to the detriment of that self-same clarity that I praised so highly before. Xenogears is my favorite game of all time, but it also had a problem in this area. To unlock new death blows, which were your character's most powerful attacks, you needed to... Actually, forget it. I don't want to spend half this video trying to explain that system to you, and you don't want me to do that either. All you need to know is that upon my fourth playthrough of that game, 20 years after my first, I finally understood what I needed to know to unlock new death blows, and only by learning it through reading an internet guide. I love you, Xenogears, but that was bad design, full stop. In modern games, either through annoying tutorials or very deep and useful menus, at least don't do this. They'll at least help you understand the mechanics of the game you're playing. And while hand-holding can be annoying, we shouldn't completely discount the benefit of accessibility either. Not everyone is perfectly able, firstly, and while it's probably just the case that my uncle and I were idiots in 1995, we spent 2 hours trying and failing to figure out how to progress in a game that we ultimately dropped forever. We would have done anything that summer day to have an annoying fairy flutter up to our ears and shout,
"Hey, listen!"
But I understand it's not 1995 anymore. We are in the age of the internet, and the solution to your problem is only ever a Google search away. We also shouldn't pretend that every comparison we can make between classic and modern games is apples to apples. While I've been quite vocal that I tend to like linear, tighter, smaller games, it doesn't mean I never have an appetite for the big, stunning, sweeping vistas that the Xenoblade series has to offer. In fact, I quite enjoy exploring those worlds, complete with all of its nooks, crannies, and neck-craning verticality. And in the cool light of day, I imagine this is a be careful what you wish for moment, because I honestly don't think I would like to take on worlds like that without detailed maps, icons, and quest markers. We shouldn't pretend that navigating a world that looks like this is anything like navigating a world that looks like this. I'll happily join the choir in noticing that the age of ultra-realistic, high-fidelity graphics has its problems. There's this unreal five-ification of games where everything looks samey, void of any charm or style. But that problem aside, if you, like me, at least have the occasional mood to lose yourself in a huge asset-dense 3D world, we shouldn't be quick to shit on game designers as quote-unquote holding our hands just because they have probably rightly deigned to give us a few more navigation tools to work with. What I'm articulating is that yes, too much hand-holding definitely sucks, but getting stuck and unable to navigate a game world also sucks. There is plenty of middle ground between a motor-mouthed princess live streaming from your eardrum and an austere, desolate hellscape where you can expect no useful in-game support whatsoever. Remember how earlier I mentioned a game developer can only fit so much game onto their game? Well, sometimes the stars align and an extremely talented studio will give us both barrels of game, and the whole world will absolutely be here for it. The critically and deservedly acclaimed Baldur's Gate 3 is no small fry, and it's even more huge because nearly every scenario in the game can be resolved in multitudes of ways, virtually limited only by your imagination and ingenuity. In most moods, I'm the tightly paced, linear-loving, decision-fatigued, give my weary brain a rest please guy, but I'll stand Baldur's Gate at a pin drop. I'll grease the wheels of this tired brain for a game that good and immersive any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Graphics are and always have been the aspect of gaming that's mattered least to me. But even then, I can't pretend that the 3D era didn't drastically help escalate the dramatic tension and wow factor of gaming. This was even true of big-budget cinematics found as early as the PS1 and certainly PS2 eras. This scene stole my heart as a kid, and brings a tear to my weary eye to this day. But if you're young enough and or never played Final Fantasy VI, this might just look like a cute mess of pixels, and you might just think I'm a sentimental old boomer, which wouldn't be wrong. But I also get nostalgic and sentimental for the opening scenes of Final Fantasies 7 and 10, and your youthful imaginations aren't going to have to work very hard to understand the spectacle of these also old classics, all to say nothing of the banging spectacle you can expect from the absolutely goated Expedition 33. Yes, I sit firmly in the camp of retro graphics are lovely and charming, and I actually do like using my imagination to help color the world. But you know what? I also had to pick my jaw up off the floor after the paintress ripped reality apart. So, after all of this, my verdict is... loving the old and embracing the new isn't a zero-sum game. There need not be any battle lines here. After taking it upon myself to attack this topic again, after meditating on this for months, and after reckoning the reasonable criticisms I faced the last time I brushed upon this issue, I still feel this way. You can like two things. I love many games I grew up with, and I love many games I experienced as a middle-aged adult. And look, I tacitly agreed in this video to just focus on game design intrinsically and not pull any of my usual funny business of player psychology talk, and I think I delivered, so let me just be me for the rest of this video, yeah? You can do whatever you want in a thought experiment, but out in the field, you cannot, in fact, remove yourself from the equation of your experiences. You're stuck with you. This means your biases, preferences, moods, and experiences will always color every interaction you ever have. I find this to be an unfair disadvantage to new media. Basically, the more media experiences we have, indeed, the more media literate we become, the more fatigued or at the very least desensitized we get with tropes. But tropes exist for a reason. They are elements that in their original form really worked and bedazzled us. You never forget the first time a party member betrays you. How could you do this to me, Kane? But by the 30th time a party member turns on you, your grizzled old jaded ass only has the wherewithal to think, "Aw, honey, could I offer you a side of French fries to go with all of that unresolved trauma and existential nihilism?" So I think it is a fact that newer media necessarily risks being more tropey and frankly derivative, as the dual lexicons of media and your personal experiences eternally expand in tandem. And if all of this sounds depressing and hopeless, that's because it isn't, and you're either new to my channel or you've been napping during class. I have an entire library of videos on this channel exploring the meaning and joy of gaming as an adult, and I stand by every single word I've said. Adults are capable of experiencing awe. We are always cultivating moments that we will be nostalgic about at some point in the future. We alchemize with our gaming experiences, letting the best of them imprint onto our identities, whilst bringing ourselves back to them in turn with the full glory of our own weirdness and obsessive quirks. I have a boatload of links to select topics in this video description. You are strongly encouraged to binge. And hey, while you're at it, like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, hype this video.
Press buttons, fuck around and find out.
Old games are good, new games are good, good games are good. Any game that lights that spark in your ice-shackled heart and brings a misty eye to your stone-wrought face is good. Your favorite game, however old it is, or whenever it gets made at some point in the future, is probably still out there. Happy hunting.